This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Nwandi Lawson. Tonight on Lawmakers, a rally against legislation that would allow Atlanta Gas Light a lot of leeway in cost recovery for a new natural gas pipeline.
And the Senate Appropriations Committee passes out its version of the FY07 budget. And we'll have the highlights of Governor Sonny Perdue's methamphetamine town hall meeting today with U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales.
But first, our lead story tonight, a bill that aims to make parents wait longer to divorce fails to pass the House. After the House Judiciary Committee scaled back many of the provisions of a bill creating a longer waiting period for parents seeking to divorce, the House today voted to return Senate Bill 25 to the Rules Committee. The committee's substitute to Senate Bill 25 extends the waiting period for divorcing parents from 30 to 120 days and requires parents of minor children to attend 3 hours of parenting education. It offers exemptions for cases of domestic violence, indigents, and incarcerated spouses. Representative John Lunsford tried to persuade his colleagues to vote their consciences on the measure.
I'm going to share something from the heart with you. 24 years ago, I got a divorce. And I can tell you that during that divorce, we damaged our children. My two oldest kids got pulled into the middle of it over custody battles, fighting over the kids. Who's getting them this weekend? Who's not getting them this weekend? Who's right? Who's wrong? Mom lied, Dad lied. And you know what? I've been very blessed that they ended up normal. But if there'd been a class like is being taught, and if you'll look on your desk, every one of you has on there a copy of Navigating Family Change. And this is actually just a reprint of what Gwinnett County is furnishing now through their judicial system. Many of your jurisdictions currently give this training class for people that are divorcing with children.
Some legislators had reservations about the bill, including a concern that couples would file false affidavits in order to hasten their divorces and that more money would have to be spent on attorney's fees. Several attorneys spoke against the bill, including Representative Mark Hatfield, who practices family law.
Children may be caught in a situation between parents who are at each other's throats. Maybe not violence, maybe it doesn't rise to the level of violence, but they're between two parents who are arguing, a hostile environment at home, and the children are going to be sentenced basically to 4 months worth of that rather than 30 days.
Frankly, I'm in favor of the counseling sessions. I think they ought to take place premaritally so that not so many people who shouldn't be together should get married and then 2 years or 5 years or 10 years later get divorced. But doing it this way just honestly doesn't make sense. It is a structured bill, it is an engrossed bill. We can't change it today. I would urge that we send it back to committee for reworking, maybe dividing the issue, maybe coming out again in a way in which we can amend it.
The House agreed with Representative Bordeaux, voting 85 to 78 to recommit the bill to the Rules Committee. An attempt to have that vote reconsidered was unsuccessful. Senate Bill 25 returns to Rules.
With no debate and little opposition, the House today agreed that local school systems should be able to offer courses in Bible, history, and literature. Representative James Mills presented Senate Bill 79.
Senate Bill 79 is permissive legislation that simply allows local school boards to offer an elective course on the history and the literature of the Old Testament era and the New Testament era. This is already being done in several states across the United States. It stood Supreme Court muster. As long as it's not done in a devotional or a proselyting manner, it's simply studying the customs and the cultures of the times and the places referred to in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. There was bipartisan, overwhelming support for this in the Senate. I believe it's a well-crafted bill that meets constitutional muster.
The House passed Senate Bill 79 151 to 7. Changes made in committee send the bill back to the Senate.
House and Senate Democrats held a press conference today to voice their opposition to a bill that would help build a new natural gas pipeline in Georgia. House Bill 1325 would require the Public Service Commission to make up or down votes on a pipeline that would be built by the Atlanta Gas Light Company. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman now joins us live from the Capitol with more on that story. Jesse.
Well, in Wandy, Democrats say they oppose House Bill 1325 because it would require the PSC to make an up or down vote without allowing the Commission to provide input on specific parts of the proposal. It would allow AGL to get approval for their building recuperation rate before actually building the line. Democrats say that is unprecedented and unnecessary. Consumer rights groups joined a number of Democrats in speaking out against House Bill 1325 this morning. They say they are unhappy with the bill and the way it's being handled.
Atlanta Gas Light was the one that went to the Public Service Commission and forced them to go to a deregulated market.
The bill passed out of the Senate Regulated Industries Committee last week. Chairman Mitch Seabaugh said at the beginning of the meeting he did not intend to take a vote on the bill, but after 2 hours of testimony, the bill passed out unanimously.
The bill slipped through a Senate committee. The chairman had said there would be no vote. The chairman then took a vote.
At least one Democrat was frustrated by the decision to take a vote.
There were many interruptions during that meeting from the chair. I had to leave, take phone calls. I had to go to another meeting. By the time I got back, that bill was gone.
Chairman Seabaugh says the move was logistical, not political.
After 2.5 hours of debate, and here we are in the last few days, I've got 9 other bills in my committee that if we spent more time on this bill, those bills could die.
1325 sits in Senate rules, but expect the floor amendment endorsed by sponsor Speaker Pro Tem Mark Burkhalter and Representative Jeff Lewis.
What we're attempting to do with this amendment is actually spell out in very clear language that this must provide a net cost savings to consumers, because that's been our agenda all along.
Now, the Lewis and Burkhalter amendment would require AGL to submit a consumer savings case to the PSC before the up or down vote. Chairman Lewis says he is working on getting that amendment adopted on the Senate floor. He did not say, though, when he thought the Senate would take up the bill. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
In other news, the Senate Appropriations Committee today passed its version of the FY07 state budget. Committee Chairman Jack Hill said the focus remains on jobs, kids, and security, and he said his committee agrees with the House that frontline state law enforcement officers should get a 4% pay raise.
Whether it be a correctional officer, CO1, CO2, or whether it be a state patrolman on the road, or a DNR conservation ranger, anyone who is in direct activity on a daily basis interacting in law enforcement activities and not in a supervisory role was included in the 4% pay increase. That amount is about $7 million. It is an increase when we went back and scrubbed the numbers to more accurately reflect those individuals. Lastly, you'll find that the bond package is not substantially different from the governor's and the House's proposals in that it is just under $1 billion. We've worked under a self-imposed cap of $1 billion that was pretty much agreed to by both bodies and by the governor, and we've tried to stay within that $1 billion number, and we're a few thousand short of that. I will tell you that the ads by the Senate, though, are bipartisan.
Senator Hill said the budget bill could be on the Senate floor as early as Thursday.
Governor Perdue and U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales hosted a town hall meeting today at Reinhardt College in Waleska, Georgia, to discuss the impact of methamphetamine use, production, and its production here in Georgia and across the nation. David Zelski now joins us live with more on this event. David.
Well, Wandy, Attorney General Gonzales and Governor Perdue were joined by a panel of law enforcement and treatment specialists to answer questions the crowd had about progress being made at both state and federal levels to fight this growing problem.
As we make headway against homegrown meth labs, we've seen an increase in imported meth. So as our fight continues, I've recommended over $1 million in our 07 budget to create a 15-agent GBI meth task force that will target meth cases statewide.
As I travel around the country, the law enforcement community say that the two issues they're most concerned about are gangs and methamphetamine. And so it's something that we're focused on at the Department of Justice, and it's something that but we need your help as well. And so if there are ideas that any of you have about what else we can do, we'd like to participate in a dialogue and learn what those may be.
If you did have more conference like this, to tell us students what you're planning to do, what the penalties are, and what are the benefits of not doing methamphetamine, that maybe would possibly help us stop from even thinking about doing methamphetamine in the first place.
Certainly education is a key. I'd love to hear some of the other panelists talk about this. As I understand this drug, it's very different from other drugs. There's a very difficult to have casual use of this drug because of its highly addictive capacity. Those are the types of education things that you and your fellow students should know about, is that this is not something to play around with. This is not something that you can just casually take and then walk away from. And I'd love to hear the Attorney General and other panelists comment about that.
I would have to say that I think the federal government probably could have taken action a little bit sooner. We waited and watched how the states dealt with this issue. We try, I think through DEA, we have been for quite some time provided training with respect to state and local officials, providing grants to support training, to support drug courts. But I'm delighted now that we have some additional tools at the federal level, and we have seen through programs like we have here in Georgia that if you take certain steps like limit access to precursor chemicals, it can have a dramatic effect upon the rise of mom-and-pop labs. Now, as the governor indicated, we still have a serious problem with methamphetamine coming up through our southern border. And obviously, Georgia can only do so much with respect to dealing with that issue, and it requires the assistance, the help of the federal government to work with Mexico and try to limit the access of this.
Now, Georgia Public Broadcasting will re-air our locally produced documentary, The Georgia Meth Invasion, at 10 p.m. on April 4th, right after the PBS Frontline special, The Meth Epidemic, which begins at 9 o'clock on April 4th. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
The Senate Judiciary Committee continues to hear public testimony regarding Governor Sonny Perdue's bill that would curb the use of eminent domain. The committee heard hours of public testimony last week and will likely take action on the bill at tomorrow's meeting. Here is a sample of testimony from today's proceedings.
Currently, the cost to get into a court of law when you're facing a condemnation by an entity that has untold largesses, that quite frankly, it's an intimidation factor and it's a financial hardship on these families.
What has been opened by much of the language that has been put in this particular bill has reopened, just as you were questioning Mr. Carter, and why Mr. Carter was here to testify, was because he would like to see, and many people would like to see, things changed in the eminent domain law dealing with utilities. This is not what's at risk.
These are issues that regard value. And when we've heard some argument on this, they've said lay testimony is currently permissible in this. Any codifying of code should not be feared by anybody.
Utilities are not the abusers here. That utilities are not the ones that are at fault.
The Senate Judiciary Committee will meet tomorrow morning to vote on House Bill 1313. They'll have another busy day as the House version of sexual predator legislation is also on the committee calendar.
Well, the House gave final passage today to a measure allowing children of active service personnel up to 5 days excused absence each year to visit with their parents. The Senate substitute to House Bill 984 applies to parents or guardians who are deployed overseas. The House agreed to these changes without opposition. House Bill 984 now goes to the governor. The House disagreed with Senate changes to a bill allowing a surviving spouse to receive ad valorem property tax exemptions. House Bill 81 now goes to a conference committee. Meanwhile, Senate changes to House Bill 173, a measure to grant tax exemptions for the historic aircraft at Terra Field in Jonesboro, were not agreed to and led to this exchange between Representatives John Lunsford and Jeanette Jameson.
That was the purpose and sole purpose of this bill originally, was so a veterans organization could have antique aircraft, put them on display in a county and not pay taxes on them.
Well, sir, if I might interrupt you, I realize that it's your bill, but I would ask you please to point out to me in the House version of House Bill 173 where it refers in any way to military aircraft or anything else that vaguely resembles what the Senate did to House Bill 173 by substitute. I challenge you, sir, to show me in the House version where it mentions military aircraft.
All right, well, now, hang on a minute. We don't challenge. You can ask the question, but we don't challenge. We used to about 100 years ago, but in those days we didn't allow women in the floor of the House either, so that was the... Hey, it was a bad time. Bad time. Bad time. I'm glad we reformed, but we don't allow challenges.
I do not accept Jeanette Jameson's offer for a duel.
Now, minutes later, Representative Lunsford was also unsuccessful in persuading the House to agree to the Senate's version of House Bill 1032, revising the requirements to carry a pistol or revolver. House Bills 1032 and 173 now go to conference committee.
The Georgia Senate agrees with the House that newborn children should have additional screening tests. Senator Renee Unterman explains the Senate substitute to House Bill 1066.
This legislation, House Bill 1066, increases the number of metabolic and genetic testing of newborn babies from 13 to 29 conditions. There are approximately 135,000 live births per year in Georgia. And of those, it will pick up a certain percentage of newborns that are born with abnormalities that can then be diagnosed and treated.
The vote on House Bill 1066 was 53-0. Since it was passed by substitute, the measure returns to the House. The definition of feticide, that is the killing of an unborn child, may soon be changing in the state of Georgia through a Senate bill entitled the Unborn Victims of Violence Act. This bill came before the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee today. Lawmakers Katie Eubanks joins us live from the Capitol with more. Katie.
Gerald, SB 77 would change the laws regarding feticide in Georgia by taking away the requirement that a fetus must have reached a stage of quickening for an attacker to be prosecuted for the death of both the mother and unborn child. Bill author Senator Renee Unterman explains her legislation.
It's called the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, that recognizes when a criminal attacks a pregnant woman and injures or kills her unborn child, that he or she has actually claimed the life of two victims, that it's not one person anymore. If an unborn child is injured or killed during a crime of violence in Georgia, then the assailant may be charged with a second offense on behalf of the second victim, the unborn child. And the bill goes on to describe what an unborn child is and how it's defined as a member of the species Homo sapiens at any stage of development who is carried in the womb.
Senator Unterman came under criticism for some additional sections of her bill that create charges of assault and battery against an unborn child, but required that the child be born alive for the charges to take effect.
Because these both assault and battery offenses require the child to be born alive, law enforcement tells me people are just not going to charge these offenses. A woman is kicked in the stomach by her husband when she's pregnant. She calls 911. The cops arrive. They cannot charge these offenses. These will simply be offenses that are on the books for what I believe is a whole separate agenda that we don't have a position on, and they're never going to get used.
Senate Bill 77 was passed by committee substitute just moments ago. Reporting live, I'm Katie Eubanks for Lawmakers.
The Senate voted today to go along with substantial changes to the state tax code. Senator Casey Cagle said House Bill 1310 would mean a savings to Georgia taxpayers.
It's the update on the IRS codes. It's very taxpayer friendly, and the bill will make it easier for taxpayers to comply with the Georgia income tax code by reducing the number of differences between Georgia law and federal law. It will reduce taxes by approximately $5 million in 2006 and $11 million in 2007.
House Bill 1310 passed by a vote of 54-0. It goes to Governor Perdue for his signature.
Senator Vincent Fort says he regrets that his latest hate crime bill has not made it to the Senate floor for debate. Fort says the proposed legislation has bipartisan support, but has yet to clear the Senate Rules Committee.
Senate Bill 347 is the revision of the hate crimes law. I was very gratified, and I'm sure many people in the public were very gratified that that bill came out of the Senate Judiciary Committee with a bipartisan vote of 8-3, 4 Democrats joining 4 Republicans. And then when that bill got into the Rules Committee a couple of weeks ago, I was also gratified when that bill was requested by a bipartisan set of senators. I was less than gratified when it did not make it on the calendar, and it has not necessarily been explained to me why it was not put on the calendar. Very important bill. We passed a lot of things these past 2 years, including voter ID bills, which have created stress and division in this body, as well as in the state abroad. But I am very concerned that a bill which is a good law and order piece of legislation supported by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation as well as by the Prosecutor's Council would not get to the floor, you would not have an opportunity to vote your conscience on that bill.
Again, Senators Fort hate crime legislation resides in the Senate Rules Committee.
Another senator has weighed in on the controversial resolution honoring Jane Fonda. Last week, the Senate voted down the proposal. Senator Steve Thompson today cautioned his colleagues about judging people on a single issue.
You have the right to say what you want to say. Be careful of attacking the resolution. This is just advice for the future. Be careful of attacking resolutions until you get their meaning. We could have recognized this woman for leaving us with that personal tragedy she had after apologizing for her earlier statements in life, showing us how a mother and a daddy should get along and on Golden Pond, or her work in teen pregnancy. Let's remember why we're celebrating people today and every day. And remember, there's always a reason that you embrace or recognize someone for doing a great thing. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if you are of the Christian faith, if you can't believe in tomorrow being another day in your life after you've apologized to your God, then who are we? But I'll still say, you've got the right to oppose and to propose whatever you want to. But just be careful. If there's a day in your life you're ashamed of, just hope it doesn't come up.
Well, this next item is not controversial, but we do think it's a bit strange. Did you know that under current Georgia law that if your insurance agent pays for your lunch and during that lunch asks you to buy insurance, you could have your agent arrested? Senator Ralph Hudgens wants to change that.
We want to specify in the current code that paying for food or refreshments by an insurance or an agent, broker, or employee of an insurer for current or prospective clients during, and we're adding group sales presentations and group seminars, provided that no insurance or annuity application or contracts are offered or accepted at such presentations or seminar. That would not be a violation of the law. And then we're adding another thing, paying for business meals and entertainment by an insurer or an agent, broker, or an employee of an insurance agent or broker for current and prospective clients. So if they, during the time that you are renewing your insurance, if they buy your lunch, they will not be breaking the law.
Well, House Bill 425, which would save lunch-buying insurance agents from a life of crime, passed by substitute. The vote was 45-3, and it returns to the House.
State Insurance Commissioner John Oxendine says auto clubs like AAA should not be regulated by his department. That's why he asked the General Assembly to pass House Bill 1291. Senator Seth Harp explains.
It simply says that an automobile club is an automobile club and it's not an insurance entity. The Commissioner of Insurance does not want to regulate them. Unfortunately, the courts of Georgia, the Supreme Court said they could be, and consequently now that the Commissioner has asked us to bring this legislation to get the automobile clubs out of the insurance business, and they are not in the insurance business.
House Bill 1291 passed by a vote of 47-1. It goes to Governor Perdue.
Meanwhile, the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society was honored at the Capitol Day. Here's Senator Casey Cagle.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, it is indeed an honor for me to come and recognize these great community leaders. Here with me today I have Sarah Abbott, who is the Director of Team and Training. Good to have you with us. And also Don Shedd is here with us as well. And then Bruce Zavandi is also here. Bruce is the coach who has been involved in this program for about 9 years. And for any of y'all that'd like to be involved in team and training, he can teach you either to walk or run in these marathons, and he does a great job. And Don is the assistant coach in this activity, and then, of course, Sarah's the director. But as many of you know, leukemia obviously is a cancer of the bone marrow and the blood, and just under 200,000 people living with leukemia here in the United States, and approximately 22,000 deaths in the U.S. were attributed to leukemia in 2005. and an estimated 34,000 people are diagnosed in the U.S. last year alone. This organization obviously is fighting this cause, and last year alone they raised nearly $3 million and have about 1,000 volunteers that are active in this program, and they're doing a wonderful, wonderful work. And it's a great privilege for us to really recognize not only their work, but the cause that they fight for and the commitment that they make day in and day out to find a cure and to help life be a little bit better. And with that, Mr. President, I think Bruce would like to say just a word. Thank you. Before you do, Bruce, we've got some other members in the audience. I'd like for you all to stand in the gallery and let us recognize you. Thank you. Great. Bruce?
I'd just like to say thank you for all of the many thousands of volunteer athletes who've dedicated themselves to personal accomplishments while helping many others afflicted with leukemia and its related diseases. We thank you very much.
Well, the new commanding officer for the Army's Atlanta Recruiting Battalion is a native Georgian. Today, the Senate honored Colonel Twala Mathis, whose military decorations include the Bronze Star.
No matter where in the world I've gone throughout the last 17 years, whether under peacetime or wartime conditions, one of the most pleasant thoughts in my mind has always been returning to this great state of Georgia. While I am not a politician, I have come to appreciate everything you as professionals do and ask that you continue supporting our soldiers and their families. Georgians have historically served this country and continue to do so proudly. I am truly honored to have the opportunity to lead soldiers in providing our Army's strength and protecting our national interests. I am equally honored in being selected to serve as the commanding officer of the Atlanta Recruiting Battalion, and ask for your continued support and leadership as our soldiers serve throughout the Georgia communities. Last but not least, I thank my commanding officer, Colonel Gill, for being such a great leader, and my husband for all the great support and love throughout the last 12 years. Thank you all, and I ask for your ongoing prayers for our deployed soldiers and their families. May God bless you and this great country of freedom. Thank you.
Well, lawmakers will not be seen tomorrow because the Georgia General Assembly will be in recess. We'll be back with all the latest from under the Gold Dome Wednesday night at 7 p.m. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now, stay tuned for Antiques Roadshow, FYI. That's coming up here on GPB.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 34th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Wandy Lawson. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great evening.
See you Wednesday.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.